a key element of the that supports the performance of a company is the quality of the relational wiring of a company. The relational wiring is the fabric between people, between teams, between functions, between disciplines. So that's kind of a, if you would compare it with the body, we could compare it with the fascia of a body, or with the nervous system, something like that. So you can't see it, but it's there.
Hi and welcome to another episode of the People Hum interview series. This is your host Sneha at Leaders Hum.
People Hum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Awards that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the People Hum blog and channel, which receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month.
We have with us today Philippe Bailleur. Philippe has fully focused his career on guiding organizations around various themes of communication, leadership, teamwork, group dynamics, creativity, self-management, coaching, and much more. From the outset, this work had an impact on his personal development as well. Every customer, organization, team, or individual stimulates him to deepen everything that has to do with development. The courses that he followed and the organizations that he has worked for have now given him a very broad basis for the work that he does. Because coaching is a profession, he chose to get certified through the International Coaching Federation. In the meantime, he has more than 5,000 hours on the clock, and he has also obtained his MCC in 2020. So with that, let me give a very warm welcome to you, Philippe. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So diving into the interview, Philippe, please do tell us a bit about Living Systems Coaching and the work that you do there. And as we just spoke shortly before the interview, I read that you've had quite a journey, and we'd love to listen to what brought you onto this path.
Yeah, great. There's some parts of what I do. I took the time to think about it, but most of my work is like I channel it, and maybe it's a strange word or concept to use, but the writing I do, I'm invitated to do that kind of work, and when you use the word or the name of my company, Living Systems Coaching, there too, the name came to me. But the name came to me, and I'm very, very glad the name came to me, because it's the core of my work. And I will start with the word coaching. What I like about coaching, next to all other approaches, is that you kind of, as a coach, that you connect with the potential of your client or the team you're working with, and that you respect the nature of the system with whom you're working, and try to unfold, develop what's already there in a way. So there's a difference with kind of trying to push your solution on a system which will be rejected anyhow. So working with the logic of the system you're working with, that's great and very, I would call it natural and sustainable. So that's the coaching part. And sometimes it's a pity that the word coaching is used for everything today. So everybody is kind of a coach, and that's a pity, but that's how it is. And then you have living system, and it has been like that since I'm born. For me, a company, a family, but let's stay with companies. Companies are led like machines, and in a way there's a mechanistic part in companies, but in a way companies are social living systems. And the moment you start working with companies and embracing this living systems perspective, which is a systemic perspective, then you approach it in a totally different way. And that's kind of the work that I want to bring into the world. So companies are not machines.
Absolutely. That is entirely true. I fully agree with that. And if we've realized anything in this pandemic, it is that the power of people is unparalleled. And machines can just help people, they cannot replace them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's a tendency, and maybe it's cultural, I don't know. It's a tendency of this era. It feels like we would like to control everything. And of course, the more we try to control things, the more the uncontrollable shows up anyhow. So coaching and living systems coaching is also respecting that some things can't be controlled.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. And I love what you just mentioned about uncontrollable things happening anyway. That's wonderful. So Philippe, we'd love to hear a bit about your journey and, what has brought you onto this path.
As I already referred to my journey in our pre-conversation, and I wrote about that in my English book about trauma. I'm born in a traumatized family. I'm born in 72, and that's important. 72 is important because in that time period, therapy, coaching, and all those kind of things weren't there yet. So my parents were confronted with a lot of trauma, and they weren't surrounded with the support we have today. So they had to cope with what happened with them. And what happened with them is, first part, my dad lost his dad when he was 5 or 6 years because of an accident at work. So his dad lost his left arm, and his mom was still pregnant of his youngest son. So that's already a pretty tough situation to start your life as a boy. He married with my mother, and when he was 28, he had an accident too. Talking about systems, he had an accident too in which he lost his left arm. But he survived, luckily, but it impacted his life until today, and it impacted also our relationship, because I didn't have a dad that could embrace me, that could play with me. So it also impacted me and my relationship with my dad. When he was, I think he was 30, my parents had their first child, Vincent, my brother. But after 3 days, he had a problem with his brain, which made him extremely disabled. So he had to live in a hospital. My parents couldn't care for him. So there you have my mom that had to let go her first child. So there and then my parents decided to not challenge fate anymore, and so they planned to not go for a second child. But anyhow, three years later, I found a way, and I was born. But I can feel that from the beginning, I could feel that the context in which I was born was very brittle, very vulnerable. So from that moment, I started sensing and adapting to the fragility of the system in which I was born as a coping mechanism, which means that everywhere I come, I enter whatever system, my sensing, I can immediately sense the boundaries of a system. And only by doing healing work, and I think I started doing healing work from the age of 16, 18 years, the healing work I did transformed this coping mechanism in a quality, in a talent. And my work individual coaching, team coaching, or organizational coaching, my work is built around that, this capacity to read and feel systems in a deep way, and it hasn't been a choice. That's just what I have to do.
Absolutely, that is quite a brave journey, Philippe. I cannot imagine what you must have gone through. And one thing that I know for sure is that you are definitely a very, very great inspiration for all those who have gone through trauma. Because like we discussed earlier, you know, whether you get through it or you succumb to it makes the whole difference. And of course, it's not easy for anybody. But at the same time, even though the circumstances under which this happened to you were not all that great, I am glad that to an extent, you know, that could help you in living systems. So that's absolutely inspiring and very, very commendable.
Yeah, and you touch upon something. I'm not a religious person, although I'm Christian. My religion is Christian, but I'm not a religious person, and I do respect everybody that is religious. But I'm a very spiritual person, and even when I'm saying it, I can feel it. It touches me. I'm guided. Something is guiding me. I don't know what, but something is guiding me. And this guiding has helped me to find my way through this. Without that guiding, whatever it is, I don't know where I would be now. I don't know. So I'm very happy with the fact that I have been able to open myself for this guiding.
Absolutely. It is wonderful to always, you know, have that helping hand that can guide us. And I'm sure that you yourself must be a helping hand for other people as well. So that is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, that's part of my, that's about, it gives me meaning. Making a contribution for others, it gives me meaning, and it's something very important for me. It's life and energy giving. Yeah.
Absolutely, I can imagine that. I can completely imagine that. So moving on, the next thing that I want to ask you is that you're also the founder of Coaching for Heroes. So the name definitely sounds very interesting. We'd love to learn more about it.
When the first COVID wave started in Belgium, in Europe, via Italy, it started in Belgium. It was March 2020. We started hearing a cry for help coming from the hospitals and the care sector. And it was an interview on the television, and it was a doctor saying, now we need help to support our people. Where are all those psychologists, coaches? Where are they? And in the same day, I had a chat because I'm a co-founder. So one of the other co-founders, Magali, she called me and she said, because at that moment we couldn't see clients, so we couldn't work at that moment. So we talked to each other like, it can be possible that we don't have work to do now, and in the same time, some people are crying for help, for support. How can we build a bridge between these two worlds, taking into account that we couldn't see each other face to face or live? And there and then, Coaching for Heroes was created, and our first step was building a platform with Zoom and Calendly, via which people could book a chat with one of us, and soon we were 30-40 coaches available via this online platform.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. and we're still active today. So we are there for more than a year now, and I think we will land together with, I hope, the last wave of COVID. So we will reach our destination in the coming months, I guess.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. So how does this work? As in, you coach people? Is that what the model is like?
Well, because the moment we started building Coaching for Heroes, we because we would work with funding, so we would be free for those people that work in hospitals or elderly homes and those kind of people. We didn't want to compete with colleagues that earn their money with that. So we had to find an offer that didn't compete, which was already in the market, because it was pretty tough in that moment in the market. So at that moment we developed kind of a I would call it crisis care. The moment we could feel that a person would need more support, we connected that person with a doctor, or with a psychologist, or with a psychiatric specialist. So we just did kind of a first connection, and we kept the person in our network until we could connect him or her with a professional, with another professional, which meant that some people kind of had an enormous benefit of one conversation with one of our coaches. Some needed several conversations, and some needed to be connected with somebody. That's how we arranged it in the first wave. In the second wave, we started working, because it was possible then, we started working with teams and did kind of a debriefing with the team to check if somebody needed more care. And by doing that, we kind of offered extra capacity, because the capacity to deal with what happened with people wasn't just there. So we offered extra capacity during the COVID crisis.
That sounds so inspiring, and that sounds like wonderful work.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are in need of these resources, but they don't know how to get through them. So it always helps when you have a channel, especially in times of crisis. I mean, it's already difficult to deal with reality, and at the same time, you also have to take care about arranging for a lot of things. So it's wonderful.
But the funny or strange thing, and we talked about that with people that know the way nurses and so on work. The strange or funny thing was that those people are trained to take care. They are not trained to open up for care. So we really had to do some work to lower the road to reach out for help. Those people aren't trained to reach out.
And it's a really great distinction, right, between caring and knowing how to get people to open up. And that's absolutely essential now that you mention it. I don't think I've ever given this as much thought earlier. Yeah, absolutely. So that's absolutely, that sounds very, very wonderful, Philippe.
Because I remember in the beginning, because a lot of coaches were looking for work, even pro bono, at a certain moment we had, I think 150 coaches that wanted to work with us.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
But the inflow of questions wasn't that high in the beginning, so we really had to do some work we had to do some marketing and share some information to lower the road to come in our direction, which step by step happened. But it took a while.
Absolutely. That sounds very interesting. Aside from being great work, it also sounds really, really interesting. So moving on, Philippe, when we consider the complexity and ambiguity that has been brought on due to the pandemic, and we just briefly spoke about that, how would you suggest leaders to approach organizational coaching?
Yeah. What I start understanding, what I start to understanding, I'm doing this kind of work for more than 20 years. So maybe it's funny that you hear me say what I start understanding, but what I start understanding that a key element of the that supports the performance of a company is the quality of the relational wiring of a company. The relational wiring is the fabric between people, between teams, between functions, between disciplines. So that's kind of a, if you would compare it with the body, we could compare it with the fascia of a body, or with the nervous system, something like that. So you can't see it, but it's there. So the quality of this relational wiring determines the resilience of a company. We are in a time period where companies that are resilient can deal with the complexity we are bumping into nowadays. The companies that don't have that resilience get wounded in this kind of overwhelming period. So what I think, and that's part of my work, leaders have to open up for this living systems way of looking at companies. If they do, they will start seeing, feeling, sensing the quality of this wiring, and start understanding how important this wiring is, and start leading in a way or supporting teams in a way that this relational fabric gets nourished. And the funny thing is, a lot of IT companies understand this. You would think that soft companies or soft businesses would understand this earlier, but what I start seeing is that technical companies start understanding this, because they start understanding that if the wiring between teams building an IT platform isn't okay, it will translate in the way the IT platform works. And this door is opening up step by step, and that's great, because seeing the link between the quality of this wiring and the quality of the product you're making, the moment you start seeing that link, then we're not talking about woolly-poolly or soft business anymore. We are talking about serious things.
Absolutely. And it is so important to have that foundation in place, right? Because as systems evolve, there is eventually, inevitably bound to come a point where things might begin to feel like they are getting out of control. Yeah. And that is not the point to change the system entirely. That is the point to rely on the structure that you've built in the first place. So definitely, what you mentioned about it being a solid base for everything that goes on in the organization is definitely very, very important.
So for me, referring back to your question, leadership is also about being kind of a steward of this wiring, and it has a very human face, but it has a very it has a technical performance business phase too. So it's kind of those two perspectives coming together. Because the reason why I'm doing this work is not only because of care for people, it's in the same way care for business.
Definitely. Absolutely. And it is very important to find that balance, right? Because, at the end of the day, a leader is an individual. So every individual has separate leanings towards, say, people or towards processes. But somewhere trying to understand that instead of leaning more towards one of them and just having a balance is more important. I feel like that is the major skill that all leaders need to learn how to understand and, just balance.
Yeah, what I see when we would look at development of leaders, the more a leader grows, and it's the same for an individual, but the more he or she is able to look and work through multiple perspectives.
Absolutely.
No, it's not the human and the financial, and no, it's kind of putting all those lenses on each other, and that's the kind of leadership development we have to support.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with you on that. That's absolutely very insightful, Philippe. So your book, Stuck Dealing with Organizational Trauma, was declared as the best management book in 2017. So we'd love to gain some insights from the book. So could you please just tell us a bit about a few concepts that you've discussed in it?
Yeah. The fact that the book has been rewarded has really opened doors for this kind of work and this kind of thinking, because the moment I was writing the book, I started writing the book, I think in 2015, but a while ago I ran through my blogs, and it was this way of working was already pushing in my writing since a while. It's only in 2015 that I kind of started feeling that's what I have to write. But when I was writing, I didn't know how the idea of trauma in organizations would be embraced. Part of me thought that it was a risk to write it in such an explicit way. I remember one of my colleagues calling me when I had put something on social media that I was writing, blah, blah, blah. And he sent me a mail, and his question was, Philippe, do you really think there's a market for that kind of work? And I remember answering him, that's not what is driving me to write this book. I'm not thinking is there a market? I see a need. And the fact that the book has been rewarded gave me kind of, yes, it's the right time to open up for this topic. And because there's a first edition of the book, the book that has been awarded is the first edition. Until now, it's the fourth print, and I really worked I rewrote the book before going for the fourth edition. Sorry, but the aim of the first book was to kind of I would call it open corporate minds for this phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And I took the time to kind of explain what trauma is, how you could recognize it. And I didn't go very deep in how you could work with it, because I would already be glad if people started recognizing it. And only in the newer version of the book, and that's also in the English book, I wrote more about, once you bump into trauma, how can you deal with it? And what's important, the aim of writing this, I'm not the kind of coach or consultant or whatever that wants to label everything as trauma. That's not the aim of my writing either, but we just have to be aware that it can happen. Then at least be aware that something else will be needed to heal it.
Exactly. And the thing that you mentioned about, not knowing whether there's a market for this, I feel like that originates largely from the fact that a lot of trauma is not talked about. Sometimes it's not even processed, let alone, be talked about. So looking at it that way, there's definitely maybe not going to be a market for it. And we've come to talk so much about mental health, especially since the past year, because people are beginning to realize that every third person is affected by it, and it's absolutely normal to talk about it. So to think that you started penning this down in 2015 is absolutely commendable, because then that just opened up the conversations about trauma within your circles, and everybody who had the fortune to come across your book. So I feel like, market or not, it's just great that you felt the need to talk about it. And that's very, very impressive.
Yeah, because I did research, and I don't know if you know that I have been an officer in the army, so I have been trained to deal with crisis, to deal with chaos. And by being trained as an officer, I have been trained to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's something that shows up in the military. And by doing that, I also did some research on the history of trauma, how our society have been dealing with traumatized people, with traumatized soldiers coming back from Vietnam, whatever. It's pretty simple, because we didn't know, as a society, we just didn't know how to deal with them. We didn't know how to deal with trauma. So the only thing we could do was neglect it. But I really think there has been such beautiful research the last couple of years. Step by step, we know how to deal with trauma. So we don't have to neglect it anymore. We can work with it. But then we have to teach the right people so they can at least start doing the right thing.
Exactly. It is uncomfortable, but at the same time, the conversation is happening. And that is a great way to begin. So that's wonderful.
And in a way, and that's maybe a strange link, but in a way, we will need to embrace this healing work, because it's pretty simple, straight. Sick companies create traumatizing dynamics inside or outside. And if we look at the challenges, the global challenges we are confronted with today, we will need companies that are capable of creating healthy products, systems, tools, and so on and so on and so on.
Absolutely. And as an individual, if I know that I am impacting my coworker negatively, then I'll probably stop. But if I don't know, I won't. And it's a very vicious cycle. Yeah. So, on the outside, everything might seem all right. But at the end of the day, everybody should resolve their issues, no matter how serious or just no matter. It's something that everybody should be doing. So I completely agree with that. And with that, Philippe, we've come to the last question for today. So do you have a quote that best defines your feelings towards the future of work, workplace, and you?
Yeah, I have a short one and I have a long one. And the short one is, you can't fix a living system, but you can heal it. That's the short one. And the long one is, let's build forces for good, because that's the kind of companies we will need if we want to be capable in dealing with the challenges that are confronting us. And opening up for systems trauma will be part of that journey.
Absolutely. That is very, very insightful. And I feel like that encapsulates everything that, we've spoken about in the interview. So I honestly cannot imagine a better note to end this interview on. So once again, Philippe, you've given us so much to think about, and it was absolutely wonderful. And might I say, very brave of you to come here and share your experiences with us, because I'm sure that, even though a lot of people are not capable of talking about it, I'm sure that after listening to you today, if not, have the courage to actually talk about our problems, we've become open to realizing that, we're not the only ones and there is a way through it. So it was definitely a very inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Great. And I would like to thank you because, as I mentioned in our pre-conversation, you're a wise interviewer. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Okay then, Philippe, have a nice day ahead.
Yeah, you too.